Hi, I'm Lance Secretan. I'm a consultant working with leaders around the world to help build inspiring cultures and organizations. What you're going to hear on this program is why things are not working as well as they could in corporate America and how we can change that, and how many companies around the world have taken some of the ideas that we've developed over the years, implemented them, and achieved great success. Stay tuned.
Congratulations! You are tuned into Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Show, the #1 podcast for Fortune 500 executives and those who are dedicated to creating a quantum leap in leadership. Your host, Dov Baron, is the founder of FullMontyLeadership.com. He's an executive mentor to leaders like you, a contributing writer for Entrepreneur Magazine, CEO World, and he's been featured on CNN, Fox, CBS, and many other notable sites. Dov Baron is an international business speaker who was named by Inc. magazine as one of the top 100 leadership speakers to hire. Now, over to Dov Baron.
Welcome, dear friends, fans, and fellow aficionados of leadership excellence. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Tips for Executives, part of the Full Monty interview series. I'm your host, Dov Baron, the founder of Full Monty Leadership, and I'm here to assist you tapping into the one thing in your business that changes everything. Let me ask you, are you committed to up-leveling your leadership? Well, today, we look into leaders who, without even knowing it, are following the herd. How? Well, stay tuned and you'll find out. Remember, you can chat about this episode or any of our past episodes on our Facebook page. Just simply go to Facebook and look for Dov Baron's Leadership and Loyalty Podcast. If you're a new listener, new viewer, thank you for joining us. Strap yourself in. We're about to go full Monty. As always, you can find us on iTunes, Spotify, iHeartRadio, or wherever it is that you tune into podcasts. We always need your help in staying relevant, though, so please go over there, rate, review, and subscribe to the show. You can also catch us on traditional radio stations across the United States every Monday and Thursday, all the way from Las Vegas to Philadelphia, and now even in Washington, D.C. at Quantico. You know why, right? Because the FBI are watching us. Anyway, you can also catch us on Roku TV with over 100,000 subscribers. And if you're a regular listener, regular viewer, thank you for joining us. And thank you for making us the #1 podcast globally for Fortune 500 listeners with a potential reach of 2.5 to 4 million listeners for every show. We're honored and grateful to be cited by Inc.com as the #1 podcast to make you a better leader. You can also catch us on Spotify, Google Home, and Alexa by simply saying, play Dov Baron Podcast. Again, thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. All right, let's strip it down, dive right in. As a leader, whether you're a CEO, C-suite leader, sales leader, or leader in any capacity, you know that theory and reality are very different, particularly when it comes to leadership. The truth is you may be in the trenches, but can you get out long enough to get the perspective that you need? To be able to actually see, know, and deal with the counterproductive business practices going on right under your knees. Under your knees or under your nose? Possibly both. All right. Well, we're going to find out together. My guest on this episode is a returning champion, Dr. Lance Secretan. After building a very successful company from scratch into a global enterprise with about 72,000 full and part-time employees, he retired. He then wrote a book about his 14-year odyssey and taught budding entrepreneurs in advanced university graduate programs until one day he realized university wasn't the real world at all. This gentleman's resume could take an hour all on its own. But here's some of the highlights. Dr. Lance Secretan is the author of 21 books. Lance is a riveting speaker who I've seen present several times, and he rocks it. He is a former CEO of a Fortune 100 company, university professor, award-winning columnist, poet, author, and athlete. And when I say athlete, the guy is loony, crazy, insane as an athlete. And if you get a chance to see him and you get to see how much energy this guy has, you will never believe his seniority in the world. He coaches and advises global leaders. He's ranked among both the top 100 most influential and top 30 most influential executive coaches, top 30 most influential leadership experts globally. Among other things, he's helped companies, 6 companies, to be named as the Fortune's best companies to work for in America list. Please help me welcome the author of The Bellwether Effect, returning champion, Dr. Lance Secretan. Goes wild, young man. It's good to have you here, Lance.
That's an awesome welcome. I don't think I can say anything now to top that.
Well, it's so good to have you here, mate. As I said, your resume is ridiculously long and ridiculously impressive. So I would like to start not in your resume. I want to know who is someone that we maybe likely wouldn't even know who's been a major influence on your life.
It's funny you asked that question because I was talking to somebody, a client today about it. And, nobody has influenced management thinking, and therefore me, as much as Peter Drucker. He's a name that's past now, but nobody's done it better. And frankly, even all the new writers are basically rewiring, retreading exactly what has happened long ago by the wisest man that ever wrote about management and leadership.
Is there something specific in Peter's work that really sort of hits you?
You know what's interesting is that when I was teaching in university, I don't know how many hundreds of thousands of professors there are, but look, if you want to stand out as a professor, the only way you can do it is create a leadership model.
Mm-hmm.
There are hundreds of thousands of new leadership models being introduced every year. What's
Right.
new? We're just basically copying each other and just doing a little slight difference to the other guy and so on. But this is very helpful if you want peer review and you want to progress in the university, but it's not much use to business.
Right. Wow.
So Peter Drucker was simple, straightforward. He didn't care whether he was in a reviewed peer journal or not. It didn't matter to him. He just wanted the world to be a better place, and that's what he focused on.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you for sharing that. I really appreciate it. So let's talk about your new book, The Bellwether Effect. I cracked a joke about it before we went on air, but nonetheless, tell us what the Bellwether Effect is.
Well, the bellwether is an old English term, but it's a ram. You tie a bell around it, and then that way, when it's foggy and you can't find your sheep, the shepherd listens for the bell, and that leads him to the flock. Now, that's how I see a lot of companies. So in the old days, people like IBM, General Electric, Honeywell, those sorts of companies were bellwethers. So what they do is they'd start a trend. So GE, for example, would start TQM or Six Sigma or stack ranking, all those kinds of things, re-engineering. They were the pioneers, and everybody else, because these were well-run companies. So suddenly we ended up with things like performance appraisals.
Mm-hmm.
And where did that come from? Who started that? Well, performance appraisals started in the Army. And the Army needed, in a war, a system for quickly identifying possible promotions, because most of these people wouldn't live more than 3 or 4 years. So you had to move them quickly through the system and promote them, like to pilot or something like that. So they used performance appraisals. Well, we just copied that in the business world. And of course, it's been a disaster. So the whole world hates performance appraisals. Nobody loves them. We shouldn't be doing them. The data shows that 30% of employees suffer a performance decline after a performance appraisal. 80% of people who have performance appraisals think they're in the top 20%. Do the math. That's really demoralizing.
It's called delusion.
So why are we doing this? That's one of the things in the Bellwether Effect that shows the history of how we got here, but also how terrible it is. We haven't made any changes or improvements, and we need to change how we do this. We would never do this at home.
Well, in many ways, we haven't really changed leadership since the Roman Empire. I mean, a lot of the systems were designed by the Romans for the Roman soldiers, and we're still doing it in the boardroom, which is pretty crazy.
Pretty well the same way too, with a lot of blood and
a lot of collateral damage in the process.
Right.
So the part of this Bellwether Effect is, as I mentioned in the intro, is that we have a lot of counterproductive business practices, and you've mentioned appraisals being one of them. What can we go into, say, 1, 2, or maybe even 3 of those that CEOs, leaders need to just stop doing, and potentially what can we do instead?
Well, that's one of them, performance appraisal.
Of course.
Let me do this thought, because I think this will guide our conversation, and I'll come back to this.
Yeah.
But let's go back to the performance appraisal. So would you do this with your spouse? That's my $64,000 question. Always, right? Hi, honey. It's that time of year again. We're going to have a little conversation about your compensation and your key performance indicators, your budget. We'll do some just to see if your colleagues really approve of you, what kind of rating they give you. I mean, I wouldn't have got 7 of those words out of my mouth. I would have been out the back door.
I'm kind of thinking that you and I would be both camping in the same tent.
Really? So why would I do this? I don't do it at home because it's disrespectful, it's demoralizing, it's insulting, it diminishes people, it's horrible. Why would we ever do it at work, therefore?
Mm-hmm.
And how would you do it at home? If you were at home, what you do is say, hi, honey, how was your day? How can I help you? Why wouldn't we say that at work?
Right.
Same way, but yeah, hey, Dov, how's your day going? What can I do to help you? I'm your coach, I'm your leader, I'm your supporter, I'm your colleague. It's my job to help you. What can I do for you? We would say that at home, we'd say that at work. That's the sort of thing I'm thinking of. Another one is the language we use, Dov. Somehow, somewhere, we decided that business is war. So we talk about blowing the doors off things, being blown away, nuking the competition, destroying things, killer apps. I mean, we had this language of violence and war, which is truly uninspiring. What we're actually trying to do is not lead, we're trying to inspire. And in any organization, anywhere, whether it's a not-for-profit or a social organization or a government, whatever, it's still the same. People want to be inspired. And therefore, using the language of war is not inspiring. So one of the things a CEO can do is just remove that, take that. And it's going to be really hard because we've grown up with that. We use sports metaphors every day.
Yeah.
There are endless phrases that we use that are negative, violent, and warrior-like.
That's a very, very good point. I mean, that's actually part of the business lexicon, isn't it?
Absolutely.
Business is war, win
Right.
at all cost.
Right.
And you and I are both in the leadership world, and I know that there's a great crossover between the two of us in that we have this weird philosophy that business is actually about love, and it's about shifting the world to a place of love and using commerce to do it. Right. But at the same time, I know you're dealing with, I deal with high-level individuals. You're potentially even an echelon above that. But there's a lot of business people who go, yeah, you know what, that's fluffy nonsense. That's not going to work. And I find top people who get that. But what would you say to those people who are they're edging up that mountain, and for them, they've grown up in the war mentality. They've grown up in the war language. They've grown up at the win at all cost sensibilities. Mm-hmm. How do you get over to them and say, hold on a minute, it ain't a war?
Right. Well, there is science stuff behind this. So what is actually happening is that there are around 6,000 years of programming that we have around language. And I can show you that when we talk about, for example, let's destroy the competition, what happens is that cortisol and other stress hormones are fired in the body. That suppresses the immune system. That creates stress, makes us sick, and therefore we are often off work and so on. It's no surprise that when you're inspired, people never are away or sick. When you're motivated by fear and when you're using the language of war, people are sick all the time. And similarly, when I'm frightened, which is what happens with the warrior language, subconsciously, not necessarily consciously, but I could say, and I would say this to you, Dov, I would kill for your hair. But
I'd kill for your genes. Okay.
But when I say kill, I mean, of course, to be very friendly. I don't mean any harm to you. And yet the word is terrible. And what it's doing to you, when I say I kill for your hair, you can feel the energy in your body. I believe that I could give you a mouth swab and I could tell you whether you're motivated or inspired. Because I can see oxytocin would be in your saliva if you were inspired, and so on. And cortisol would be on your saliva if you were stressed. So I know whether you're motivated or inspired. I know whether you're in a situation where you're using the kind of language that brings about the cortisol and the stress.
Yeah, that is, that is a very, very powerful insight that I think that we've really, really got to grasp is, one of the times I saw you speak, you spoke about that. You talked about the difference between inspiration and motivation. And I think that I want to actually go into that because you wrote a book on that. Was it The Flame? Is that what it was called?
Flame and the Torch, yeah.
Right, Spark the Flame and the Torch, which is a great book. And I saw you speak on this, and I remember at the beginning of that talk, because I was actually sitting in the audience, even though we were all peers. I'm sitting in the audience, and I'm sitting around people, and they're like, I watch people not get it until about halfway through. That they couldn't grasp, because these words get lodged together. I mean, I speak about purpose, and I say purpose is not passion. You've jammed the two things together, but they're absolutely different things. Motivation, inspiration are very different things. How do we talk to us about the distinction between the two, and then how do we get people to move to inspiration rather than motivation?
Well, one of the things, and I won't go into the detail here, but one of the things that people have mistaken is that Maslow had not 5 levels in the pyramid, but 8.
8, yeah.
And the first 4 are what I call needs, because we need, for example, to belong. We need to be safe. We need to be part of a tribe. All those kinds of. So they're the fundamentals. So those actually connect to motivation.
Yep.
So we're afraid of being alone. We're afraid of not having enough food or air or being healthy, or we're afraid of not belonging. We're afraid of not having shelter. But once we get past those, then we get into the higher order of his higher 4 levels in Maslow. And those are about inspiration, because they're about love. And the reason love always powers inspiration, fear always powers motivation. So you get to the higher level, and for instance, cognitive awareness, that's about learning. It's because you're curious, because you love the world, and therefore you want to learn more and you want to grow. It's not a need, it's a desire, and it's a different thing. So a leader needs to understand the difference between the lower levels and the higher levels, and also to understand the theory rather than continuing to repeat an inaccurate theory, which is the 5 levels of Maslow. And one more thing about this, motivation, I always describe it this way as lighting a fire under someone, and inspiration is lighting a fire within someone. Yeah. And the difference is significant, because we have built all our leadership theory and all our human resource policies on fear. It's all about, I'll bribe you with a gift, promotion, salary increase, corner office, bigger budget, whatever, if you hit your targets. And if you don't hit your targets, I'm going to punish you, I'll fire you, reduce your budget, lower your, block your career opportunities, etc. This is Pavlov. Nothing's new. This is 100 years, and we have learned nothing, and this is what's upsetting people at work. Whereas if we switch gears and turn to inspiration, we have an entirely different situation.
Yeah, I remember I was at the World Business Conference, I think probably 8 years ago, and I saw Jack Welch speak, and I was not, by any stroke of the imagination, a Jack Welch fan. Back in the days of GE, I saw it as brutal, right. Firing the bottom 20% and all the rest of it. And then I saw him speak, and I was like my mouth fell open, because he had shifted 180 and was talking about the gratitude gene, and he was talking about nobody should be fired with, and talked about approaching people with curiosity and generosity. And it's like, wow, and I thought, what a wonderful piece for people who've known both sides of him, for somebody to actually sit there and say, look, if this guy's turned around, because he was king of the guillotine, right? If he's turned around to look at generosity and compassion and those kinds of things, it's like, clearly leadership has changed, yet people still cling. And you and I talked about it, because it's been the way, and people don't like to change. It's been the way since the Roman Empire. It's been the way to motivate by fear, so I wonder how we get them to you know, this is you and I having a conversation right now. How do we get them to really grasp the power, because it really is powerful, the power of inspiration over motivation, and to stop following the herd and do something that may even feel foreign?
Well, I think that you have to learn and understand the learning style of the person you're working with. So
Yes.
if we're talking about a CEO, what is it that turns them on? Because we have to talk to them in that vernacular, whatever it is.
Mm-hmm.
So it may be that they understand the science, or it may be that they understand the emotional effect of this on people, or it may be that they understand the bottom line impact. I mean, it depends where you want to take the conversation. All of those are viable, because building an inspiring culture will result in improvements in each of those. So
Yes.
it doesn't matter where you go. So you just have to take your choice of which way are you going to have the conversation. Now, the one thing that I think is impossible to deal with, unfortunately, is the CEO says, I've only got 2 more years ahead of me. I'm not interested in making waves now. I'll be out of here in 2 years. Someone else can take care of this. That's very hard to deal with. And there are a lot of CEOs who think that. There's also the syndrome of we work with analysts on a quarterly basis. We have a share price to maintain, and I don't want to do anything that makes that wobble. So, you know, if I have to suddenly invest hundreds of millions of dollars in some program that cuts my share price, I'm not going to do it.
Yeah, I know, because as a consultant, I've dealt with both of those head on. You know,
Right.
well, you know, I don't give a shit. I've only got 2 or 3 years left, and guess what? We're doing well.
Right.
Bottom line wise, you know.
Sure.
Or, well, I like the idea of this, Dov. This is wonderful, and I definitely think it will help our culture, but this could definitely have an impact on the share value for a period of time.
Right.
Yeah, and like you said, it's a brick wall. It's a brick wall.
So you need a principled leader who has better vision than that. So Howard Schultz at Starbucks, for example, or Srinath at Patagonia, or, you know, at Southwest Airlines. There are companies that understand that there are ups and downs in the whole journey, but the long game is the one we play.
Yeah, and I think that's the piece. And I want to address that with you for a moment, because, you know, you and I go in, we do the work, and you know, they love it, whoever they are, they love it. Oh, this is amazing. But we also know that human beings are slow to change and easy to change back. It's much easier to go back into the familiar. The ego mind doesn't like change. It likes the familiar. It sees the same as safe. How do we get them to stay embedded? How do we get them to stay integrating what it is? You know, even though they've seen they've seen the light, right, but people still will slide back to the darkness of where they've been.
Well, you know, I'll segue here for a second. I live part of the year in Colorado, as you know, and I teach leaders how to ski double black diamond runs in one day. So it's an event where I bring a bunch of people to come and ski with me. Most of them are in their 50s and so on, and they probably have plateaued a little bit in their adventurousness. So they are skiing, you know, greens and blues, but not really blacks. So we come to a cliff, and we stand at the top of the cliff. It's 1,000-foot drop and 60-degree pitch, and of course everybody's saying, "Oh crap!" And
hold on, just let me go change my diaper.
Right. And I'm saying, look, it's going to be fine. What did you learn first when you started skiing? And the answer usually is the snowplow. I learned how to stop. Well, there's no other sport on the planet where the first thing they teach you is how to stop doing the sport they're teaching you, right? It's that kind of upside idea. You don't learn how to stop playing tennis when you're being taught how to play tennis. So they know this, but it's embedded in their DNA. So I'm saying, if you ski down here and snowplow, you're going to die. So please do not do that. So the first thing we're going to do here is talk about letting go. You have to commit that you are not going to snowplow. Getting down here is easy, but you'll get into trouble if you snowplow. Mm-hmm. So the hard part, Dov, is getting them to let go of what they think they know. Yes. So they agree and they commit and they go down this hill and they are in heaven because they've never skied anything like this before. They never knew that they would. They now know they can, and they've got a whole new life in front of them where they could be skiing this all the time if they wanted to. So now we get down to the bottom of the mountain and we have a coffee and we say, okay, what's the learning here? How does it apply to you as a husband? Did you plateau 10, 20 years ago as a husband? What about you as a leader? What about you as a citizen, as a parent, as a friend, as a man or a woman? How are you working? What's with you right now? Are you at that plateau point? Are you pretending or believing that there is no upside, that you can't do something extraordinary and amazing that you never dreamed you could do before? Because I just showed you you could.
I love that. I love that. That is a great metaphor. As you said, no sport starts with teaching you how to not do it. That's, right. You know, and it's very easy for us, particularly, you know, those of us who are 50 plus, to say, well, you know, that was fine when I was 20, 30, maybe even 40, but, you know, to give up, I think that we plateau in so many ways. And I love that you bring it back to, well, how does this apply? You know, one of the things that when we go in and work with a company and I'll work with the C-suite, and I say, here's my promise to you. If this doesn't change your marriage, if this doesn't change your parenting, if this doesn't change the way you are as a human being with your friends, I've not done my job.
Right.
Because that's what leadership is. It's how we live. How, you know, because leadership is impact and influence, and I can't, that doesn't end at 5 p.m. or I got to go home with that. And I love that you bring that to them in such a visceral way. It's like, you know, right. Oh, I didn't die. Right. Maybe I can do something else. I love right. that. Thank you. That's really wonderful. You know, you've been around a long time in business. You've been doing all kinds of things. Including starting a company that most people today I don't even think know about unless they live in Europe, which is Manpower. You know, I am old enough, and I was born in the UK. I remember Manpower very well. People don't know Manpower. Talk to us about becoming the CEO of Manpower, growing that, and how that became a turning point in your life, in your leadership, and even in your business.
Well, you know, I was 27 when I became CEO. So honestly,
27.
I knew nothing at all. Here I am. You know, I think I know a lot, but in reality, I don't. And it's one thing to sort of brag about what you think you know until you actually have to do it. And then, of course, then you don't know what you're doing. So I'm thinking I had a boss from hell for many years before that, a really, really tyrannical boss. And so when I got to Manpower, I thought, okay, so I don't know what I'm doing. I'm just going to do the opposite of what my boss did, my old boss.
That's interesting.
Work like a charm. And I have used that ever since. So a lot of our work, for example, has been based on the idea of doing research, finding out what people do not like. I'll give you an example. We did research to find out what people do not like about leaders. And they said, well, we don't like cowards. We don't like phony people. We don't like people who are selfish. We don't like people who lie. We don't like people who rule with fear. And we don't like idiots. So we said, okay.
I don't like that in people, period. Forget leaders.
We just said, why don't we just do the opposite then?
Right.
The opposite is courage, authenticity, service, truthfulness, love, and effectiveness. We call those the castle principles. If we love people who are courageous, we love people who are authentic. I use that word love carefully. We love people who serve others. We love people who tell the truth. We love people who are loving in the way they work with people, and we love people who are effective. So if we want to be inspiring, let's just live the castle principles. Well, there's an example of how, you know, when I was running Manpower, all I could figure out was, well, that doesn't work. It didn't work for me, so I'm going to do the opposite. And so we built this amazing business, and basically on that platform, because I didn't know what to do. Now, one other thing I'd say about this, I had a sponsor who looked at me and said, I think this guy could amount to something. And we all need that. We all need it. Because I had a lot of people who said, you will never amount to anything.
Mm-hmm.
And Most of us have a lot of those kinds of people in our lives too. So you need someone who shepherds you, who chaperones you, who is a steward, who's mentor, who says, "Hey, I'll give you the opportunity. Count on me for support and help, but I think you've got what it takes to do this."
So I fully agree with you on that, but I'm now shifting myself into the space of a viewer or listener who's going, I get that, I see that. How the heck do I find that person? How do I find some, let's say Charlie, Susan, whoever it might be, is saying, I recognize that I need somebody who believes in me, who can be a mentor, who's at that level, but I don't have that person. I don't even know where to look. How do we help them to find that?
Well, I'm not sure I know the answer, but when I was teaching at university, students would say to me, "So what's a great company to work for? If I graduate here, who should I go and work for?" And they're expecting me to say something like GE or Procter & Gamble or IBM or something. And I would say to them, what I would find is the best mentor you can possibly think of. In the day, it would be Pierre Trudeau, or head of one of the great corporations or something like that. Go call them and say you want to work for them for 90 days free. Just work with them. Learn your butt off. And if you do a good job, they'll probably hire you. Now, what could be better? You're now hired by one of the people you most respect and admire, a great mentor, a great leader. How would you have ever achieved that otherwise? If you're just in the mainstream, throwing in your resume like everybody else, you'll never get seen.
No.
But that sort of thing, I think that's what we need to do in even as adults. I don't know about you, but I often go to people that I really admire and say, I want to help you. I want to support you, because I know I learn as much as I am able to share with you.
Yeah, I was speaking for a startup lab, and we were working with them and helping them to grow. It was a voluntary piece I was doing with them. And, and they were talking to me about it, and they were talking about going to university because they were very young. And I said, my advice is probably not what you're going to want to hear. And they said, what do you mean? I said, I can't recommend that you go to university. And they go, well, what do you mean? I said, well, if you go to university, you're going to come out with information that is probably going to be dated very fast because we're changing so fast. On top of that, you're going to end up with you or your parents are going to end up with a ton of debt. Right. So I can't recommend that either. So I said, my best advice, it's not the advice you should follow, it's just my advice, and you can decide what you want, is if you can get your mom and dad to support you, or you've got some savings to support yourself, you can say, where would I really like to work where they are doing the thing that I love, where there's a leader who I so respect. I said, if you go do 2 years there as an intern, work for free.
Yeah.
That education is going to be far more valuable than ever going to university, because you come out of university, you get a piece of paper and you're in line with another million people with a piece of paper, versus saying, I'm already in and I already know it and I'm up to date. It's that same principle of recognizing that. I think that it's kind of like asking for the date. That takes courage. I know I was terrible at asking for dates, but it's like, that's the courage.
Right. The first of the castle principles. That's why it's first. Because nothing happens until we're courageous enough. We can't say, I'm sorry. We can't say, I love you. We can't change. We can't say, I made a mistake. I need your help. None of those things can be done without courage. So it takes courage to start the whole journey. And the other bellwether effect that I think is very prevalent, and I would invite people to take the little quiz. There's a quiz on our website. It's secretan.com/bellwether. It's a little tiny quiz, takes 1 minute, and it'll tell you whether or not you're a victim of the bellwether effect. But think about how fear is prevalent in modern organizations. We're afraid of missing our targets, our budgets. We're afraid of our performance appraisals. We're afraid of our boss. We're afraid of losing our job. We're afraid of the economy and politics. We're afraid of getting called out on something like hugging or touching or Me Too or discrimination, there's just a million different things that we're now frightened of. This is slowing us down. And we have this amazing difficulty of bringing the word love into our work language.
Yeah.
wouldn't we love our work? Why wouldn't we love each other at work? I want to work with people that I love. And I don't say, goodbye, honey, I'm going to work now. I'm going to be decisive and motivational and visionary and so on. I'm home at the end of the day. Hi, honey, I'm going to be intimate, passionate, vulnerable, and humble. I mean, it doesn't work like that.
No.
We're one human being, and we need to be that everywhere with everybody. And being a loving person and being able to say to someone, I love you, I love working with you, we need to grow up and be able to do that.
But, you know, you just nailed something that I deeply believe and have stood by, and that is, you know, people feel like it's immature to be in a love space at work. And I go, no, it's the most mature. Yes. Like, I want to love the people I work with. I want to love, whether that's as in a member of my team or whether that's we're working with you. And if I can't, and I often say, you know, we're working with a company, and I know you have the similar experience. I'm working with a company, and they want us to come work with them, and I'm interviewing them every bit as much as they're interviewing me, maybe more, because I'm like, you know, and I've said this, I say this to leaders, I know if I can't see the possibility of me falling in love with you, it's not romantic, but if I can't see the possibility of me falling in love with you, we're not going to work together. And they go, what do you mean falling in love with me? If I can't love you, if I can't see in you greatness that is beyond your own mind, that is beyond your own vision, that is your heart and your soul that you want to bring to leadership, why would we work together?
Right.
So it's that same thing. And I think that we're both a bit on the edge. I mean, you've been doing this for a very long time, and I love and respect that about you. But it's really difficult to get people to that. But I think I believe it's key, and it's actually key in a context of we all know as leaders, we all know that leadership as it stands, particularly in the context of engagement, it sucks. Engagement sucks. The research is there. It's terrible. And you have a chapter in your book where you speak about employee engagement and its paradox. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think this is an important piece.
Well, engagement surveys were started 40 years ago, principally by Gallup, but other companies too.
Sure.
But Gallup was really the forerunner here. And it's been a boondoggle for these companies. It has been a wonderful money-making opportunity. It's done absolutely nothing for anybody else. So for 40 years, those numbers have been identical. Basically, 70% of the population is either disengaged or actively disengaged.
Yeah, working against you.
Yeah. Well, and 30% are working in the right direction, trying to support you. But basically, I say in the book, if this was a rowing eight, then 4 would be looking around at the scenery, 3 would be doing all the work, and 1 would be trying to sink the boat. And we're supposed to be happy with that? This is ridiculous. And then we have questions in, for example, Gallup survey, which is the Q12. Do you have all the materials necessary to do your work? What a ridiculous question. I mean, what manager in their right mind doesn't give their employees all the tools they need to get their job done? It's not about the employee, it's about you as a leader. If you don't do that, you're an idiot. And secondly, is this telling us that they're engaged, that they've got the right tools? This is silly. We're just wasting our time. And so the fact that we've not moved this needle 1 point in 40 years, and we're still doing the same thing, that's the definition of insanity. Why are we doing that? So we need to ask questions, and the questions will come back to the Castle survey, the Castle principles. Is my leader courageous? Am I able to be courageous on the job? Is our company courageous? Is my leader authentic? Are we all authentic with each other? Am I authentic with the customers? Am I authentic with government, with unions, with my colleagues? Do I serve others? Do I tell the truth? Can we tell the truth? Are we a company that tells the truth? Are we loving in our culture? I mean, these are all words and questions, aren't they, that we could ask, much more poignant than do you have the right tools to do the job?
Yeah, I agree with that. And I know that that's foundational in all the work that you do is bringing people back to those Castle principles. And the truth of the matter is that any one of them can stand alone in the shift of an organization. I mean, just taking leaders and saying, okay, let's start here. What did you do today that was courageous?
Right.
And like, well, not much. Okay. So what can you do tomorrow that's courageous?
Right.
Because one of the things I love to say to people is something I learned about myself years ago is, I was an adrenaline junkie. I know some other people like that who have shaved heads. I was an adrenaline junkie. And I would do things that people go, oh my God, you're so courageous. And I go, no, that's not courage. And they go, what do you mean? It's not courageous for me because it doesn't take courage for me to do it. I don't have to overcome any massive fear. Courage is subjective. Mm-hmm. Courage is what it is that you're afraid of doing. And maybe that's giving somebody a compliment. Maybe that's your courageous act of the day. Maybe it's not skiing a black diamond or a double black diamond. Maybe it's not free climbing like I used to do. Maybe it's just simply looking at somebody and saying, thank you, you rock. Because your whole ego freaks out when you're about to do that. And that is, living a life of courage. Like, like you said, you got courage, you got authenticity. We can go through the whole piece. But even to anybody watching, listening, just stop and say one. Just pick one. Did I do that today? No. Could I do it today? Yes. How can I do it today? Any small thing. I love that you come back to that.
Mm-hmm. Absolutely. It's a kind of a North Star, for the whole work we do, because that's what makes for inspiring people. And it's not rocket science. I mean, as I said earlier, we got there by finding out what pisses people off. Well, we know what that is. Let's do the opposite. Not
exactly.
But this is all modeling, because, for instance, the Declaration of Independence says we will not be taxed without representation. Well, that's just an opposite statement of we're being taxed without representation. So what happens is we take the thing that's negative and we rewrite it as a constitutional statement, and that's an aspirational statement now, and that's how we live. We will not be taxed without representation. Well, I'm doing nothing different with the Castle Principles, taking the negative and just flipping it and saying, let's do that opposite.
It's interesting you brought that up, because what people don't know is most people are at least vaguely familiar with the Ten Commandments. But what they don't know is in the Egyptian Book of the Dead, those commandments are given, but they're given in the positive. It's not thou shalt not. They're all positive. They're all given in the positive, right? It's interesting. And again, just to help people understand, we get it. We understand that human beings are more motivated by pain than they are by pleasure. But there is a discipline and a focus to committing to saying, I will not drive the bus that way. You can still get from A to B by driving in reverse. You can, if you decide that's where you're going, but you're going to slow down the process and it's going to be more awkward, and you're also going to get a creak in your neck. Or you can turn the bus around and point in the right direction, which is being motivated by the let's do's rather than let's nots. And it's a very good principle. I want to change direction for a minute if I can, Lance. Is that all right with you?
Of course.
You've written 21 books. This is a full Monty leadership show, and I know that you and I are very much committed to being human and being vulnerable and being authentic. You've written 21 books on leadership or leadership related. I want to speak to you about another book, if that's okay. One of the books that you wrote, a more recent book, which was your book called A Love Story, an immensely personal memoir. Talk to us a little bit about that, because I think that it's very important for leaders to get this level of humanity, authenticity, and vulnerability, and get that this is vitally important.
Well, it's kind of you to bring that up. I was married to an incredible woman. Her name was Tricia. We were together for 30 years, never had a fight, just in a blissful relationship. Never, not perfect, but almost as perfect as anybody could ever hope for. And she died, broke my heart. And over the years, I'd written a lot of poetry for her, just little snippets and things, back of envelope stuff. But I stashed it all away, and I decided to pull it all out and look at it and spiff it up a bit and polish it up, and then write a story about how we met, our whole journey together and the end and so on. So the book, I put a lot of effort into making it a beautiful book. So it's got ragged edges and a silk marker and a beautiful piece of artwork on the front and so on. And it's done really well. It hasn't sold really well, but it's won rave reviews, all kinds of awards. I mean, my leadership books sell much better than that. But on the other hand, it was a work of love, and people do seem to love it. And it is doing, I mean, it's doing reasonably well. And what people are doing, by the way, is they are, couples are reading the book a chapter at a time to each other before they go to sleep. And it's very cool. There's some, cool poems in there.
But, I wonder what, I want to ask you, because you and I had talked about this briefly before, but I want to ask you, what is it like? Because, you are very famous for being the leadership guy who writes these leadership books. You're on stage with the best of the best in that world, to suddenly be seen as this romantic writer.
I don't know that people see me that way. Honestly, Dov, the wind was taken out of my sails when Trish died. So I basically canceled all my work for pretty well a year before she passed away, because I was trying to be a nurse for her and so on. So my business kind of went off the rails too. So I was not focused on that. I really wanted to just write this legacy book while it was especially fresh in my mind. And I particularly wanted to share it with people who basically have given up hope of finding something like that. And the data is terrible. 55% of first marriages fail, 65% of second marriages fail, and 75% of third marriages fail. So we don't actually learn anything. It just gets worse each time.
We don't learn from our mistakes. We get worse. And by the time you're in the fifth marriage, it's in the 90+ percentile. People do not learn from their mistakes because they keep saying, well, it's because I keep finding these bitches, or I keep finding these assholes. No. Right. Try a mirror. You are the common denominator in every relationship.
Right. Yeah, right. Yeah. Well, and some of the things we've been talking about are exactly the same. And actually, I developed this thing, a corporate theory of vitality. Because what is vitality about? It's about using the principles of a romantic relationship at work. Now, I don't mean to get into a messy Me Too conversation here. I just mean, why would you say things that are offensive or demeaning or put people down? Your marriage won't last if you do that, but neither will your job.
Yes.
Same thing. So why don't we get it right? And I've done this little survey. I surveyed, what are the words we use to inspire, or at least to describe what we think of as great leaders? And the words are like visionary and decisive, strategic thinker, good decision maker, team builder, motivator, and so on. And then I did a research piece around, well, what are the words we use to describe a great romantic relationship? Fun, trustful, trusting, truthful, high integrity, vulnerable, passionate, loving, playful. These are not words we use in the business context. So what are we supposed to do? Live two lives? I call this the Jekyll and Hyde theory because it's ridiculous. We can't do that. And where did we get this idea that we have to be a warrior and macho and use all this strong language and not say I love you and so on? Where did all this come from? It's goofy. Work is just another part of life.
Yeah, fully agree with you. Now, years ago, I think it's probably about maybe more than 5 years ago, I had a guest on my show by the name of Charlie Johnson. Charlie Johnson, who at the time was the president of the Pay It Forward Foundation. Today, you're the president. Tell us a little bit about that and your involvement with the Pay It Forward Foundation.
Well, it's interesting. So Catherine Ryan Hyde wrote a wonderful book called Pay It Forward, which became a movie with Kevin Spacey and Helen Hunt. Very famous. She writes, prodigious writer. She's written about 70 books or something. And lovely woman. She spoke at one of the conferences that I ran. We used to run conferences for all our faculty and so on. She came to speak and we got to be good friends. And so recently she asked me if I would be chairman of the new foundation. So the foundation is limping a little at the moment, and we're trying to get it rolling, but it's based on the book. It's very strong in schools. where we teach students to pay it forward. But it's a powerful idea, as you know.
I do. And I'd just like you to tell people about it because the book is quite a while ago. Haley Joel Osment was a little boy in the movie.
Right.
Now he's a very full-grown man with a heavy beard. So,
Right.
that gives you a clue of how long ago it was.
Right.
And I think that there may be many of our viewers and listeners who don't even know what pay it forward actually means.
Right. Well, the idea is that you do something that's good for another person without expecting anything from them, except to ask them to do the same thing for someone else. In other words, to show the same kindness in whatever way that takes to someone else. We actually have a coin that we have that on the one side it says, "Thank you for inspiring me today and doing wonderful things." And on the other side it says, "Keep this coin as long as you feel appropriate, and when the time is right, pay it forward." We call that Inspire Change, and they're all over the world, these things. They're fun because people love them.
Yeah, it's beautiful. I mean, when I didn't know that you were with the Pay It Forward Foundation, and when I read that, I went, yeah, that's totally appropriate. That makes a lot of sense to me. Knowing you as I've done. I mean, you and I have known each other, I think, for like 8 years or something. So, everything I've always known about you, that's where you've come from.
Mm-hmm.
What is the most common misunderstanding about what it is that you do? Because I think that there's a perception of us, and then there's what we actually do and who we actually are. What is the most common misunderstanding about how you work with leaders, or what it is that you do as a company?
I think you used the phrase earlier about soft skills, sort of soft and fluffy, and I think that's what people think about this work. It's, of course, the hardest, not the easiest or the softest. It's really hard to be the kind of person that lifts other people up, and that you invest the time in doing that rather than answering all your email and dealing with all your appointments and so on, making your budgets and the rest of it. Now, not that that's unimportant, but engaging with others and inspiring them is even more important. Mm-hmm. And so a lot of people feel that's a soft skill and I can do without that. Or they think, when times get tough and I have to cut my budget, then the training budget and the human resource budget and the leadership budget, they're all things that can go out the window. So I think the misunderstanding is that this is fluff or light, and in reality, it's the opposite.
Mm-hmm. I agree.
That's a hard thing to explain to people.
Yeah, it is. One of the things that in our trainings we explain is that soft skills are the new bottom line.
Yep.
Right. I mean,
along those lines, one of my taglines today is that the employee is the new customer.
Mm-hmm. Yes, so, and that's part of the Bellwether book, right?
Right.
The employee is the new customer. Yeah.
Yeah.
And Branson talked about that so well. I'm a great believer that we are shaped and formed in our childhood, and that what goes on in our childhood gives us wings or can crush our wings, and from which we can glue them back together and make better wings, or we can do something else. What part of your formative years, no matter where it came from, whether it was good or it was bad, how do you feel like your childhood has shaped who you are today?
Well, a few minutes after I was born, the world declared a war. So I'm not sure if those two things are connected or not, but in any case,
oh, he's here. That's it. We're going to war.
Yeah, let's go. This guy's an idiot. The first few years of my life, therefore, were warriors, and I mean warriors. Mm-hmm. So we had houses next to us bombed, and we had an air raid shelter at the bottom of our garden. And I think I was in my 30s before the air raid siren that I would hear, that didn't terrify me. Right. Same as the fire reel, right? So, the upbringing of scarcity, rationing, fear, not knowing if you'd live, not seeing your parents because they're skedaddling in other places, and the war effort and all that. So very, very tricky upbringing. And then we left and went to the Argentine, and I lived in Argentina for a number of years. I went to school there, and my father was working there, and so on. So I was in a foreign country with a foreign language. So very strange early years, you know. And the other thing too is that I was in a situation where I don't know if you know this, but I was the #1 child actor in the English-speaking language. So if you go to imdb.com and look up my name, you'll see all the movies I was in. So I was a child star from around 10 years old to 15. So
you were actually in a couple of famous movies, though, weren't you?
Oh, yeah, sure, and West End theaters in London and so on. And actually, playwrights were writing plays for me. So I was a big deal until my voice broke. That's the end of my career.
Till the squirrel brought home your nuts. It's funny. Yeah, because I remember reading about that when we very first met. I was like, oh my God, like I know that movie. I was a kid seeing this movie as an older movie and then going, oh my God, that was you?
Yeah, you're thinking of Heidi. Are you thinking of Heidi?
Probably, yes.
Yeah, the movie Heidi. Well, that's a long time ago. But so there's 3 chunks: the war, Argentina, the stage, and theater world. So very strange upbringing, as you can imagine. So I think I had a lucky upbringing in the sense that it was very rich, diverse, multicultural. I didn't go to school. I had a home tutor because I was touring all the time in the theater business. So very intense. I learned French and English from my tutor and so on. So very good early days education. So I think a lot of those things were forming. A lot of things went wrong. And I think the war helped me to understand the what's the right word? The idiocy of violence.
But, I think it's so interesting, and I do purpose work with leaders one-on-one as well as with companies. And one of the things I will talk about is the thing that wounded you is the thing that nurtures your purpose. So here you are growing up in an environment of bombs dropping, air raid shelters, war. And today at 80, you're having conversations about let's remove the language of war from leadership. And I just think, wow, this is what I say about childhood impacting us, because I don't know that would have such a fire for you and such a great passion for you if you didn't understand what war was. So it's a wonderful seed planting back in those days that's taken all these years to fully come into gestation and then to birth into like, we've got to remove war language from leadership. Phenomenal.
Yes. And nobody has experience of war anymore. Now, if you were in Vietnam or Korea or Iraq or Iran or whatever, Syria, a limited number of people do, but most of us don't have any clue about what war is really like. What are the conditions when you can't find food, for example, or when your cousin is no longer there anymore because they flew off and they didn't come back? Those are the kinds of things that most people just don't understand.
No, and that's why we've become so discompassionate and we've othered people. Yeah. When I spoke in Iran and I came back and I wrote a piece called The 12 Myths About Iran, was because, there's so much war hawking around Iran. That was 3 years ago. It's gotten worse with Bolton and the other crazy people like that. I wrote about how, Iranians are no different than us. They have kids that go to school. Their city is a modern city. Tehran is a very modern city. These are not people running around on camels with, crazy outfits on going, look, death to the West. That's the propaganda, the bullshit, but not the truth. That these are just people like us. And this is the problem, is that we have learned to other. And it's fascinating to me that many of the people who wrote and responded to me about that article were people who'd actually been in war and said, thank you for writing this. This is important. We need to understand, because I served in Iraq and I served in Afghanistan and I realized they were people and I didn't get that until I got there.
Right.
Right.
And what's the upside? There isn't. The upside?
There's no upside that I can find to war.
No. So what that tells us is that motivation and fear, which is the warrior approach, is an unproductive solution. We've been in Afghanistan now for what, 18 years or something? It's the longest war in American history, and it's not ending anytime soon either. So what was the point of that? And supposing, as somebody very smartly pointed out, supposing America had spent $1 billion building the most amazing mosque on the planet in Afghanistan. For $1 billion, you would have gained way more than $100 billion in wasted bombs and ammunitions.
That's a great point. I love that. Lance, we're coming towards the end, and it's time for us to go into our quick fire round. Are you ready?
Oh, I suppose. I don't know.
What makes Lance Secretan cry?
Oh, well, lots of things nowadays. Movies, the loss of my spouse, just about many lyrics of music, anything that's fun and useful. I cry all the time. I'm not ashamed of it.
What makes you cry laughing?
Oh, you know, I'm not sure some of the best people are around anymore, but some of the old people, especially the British, was so funny. Benny Hill, I just look at him and I fall on the floor laughing. He's just the most funny man on the planet. Was.
Are you a Monty Python fan?
Yeah, sort of. Some days. When it gets gross, I sort of tune out. But otherwise, yes.
Yeah, I was definitely still a Monty Python fan to this day. I think I always will be.
I haven't had TV for 40 years, so I don't see some of these folks.
Yeah, that's pretty cool. What's a guilty pleasure for you?
Lafroig malt whiskey.
Oh, nice. Very nice. What's something you learned in the last 24 to 48 hours?
I'm learning about what we were talking earlier about CEOs who don't want to accept change because they're going to be out of here soon, and trying to figure out how to manage that. That's one of the things I've learned. I've also learned that the song of the rose-breasted grosbeak and the American robin are very similar.
Wow, that's cool. Thank you for that. In a parallel universe, what's your career?
Rock and roll star.
Yeah?
I'd be out there. I'd be the lead singer for Queen.
Oh! Well, you know, Paul, what's his name? Paul used to be with Free. He took over the job for a while from Freddie.
Oh, yes, that's right. Yeah.
He lives in White Rock, British Columbia.
Oh, yes.
And now Adam Lambert is doing it. I mean, and did you see Bohemian Rhapsody?
Yes, I did. Yeah.
Did you enjoy it?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Oh, yeah, it was amazing, huh?
I'm a Queen fan, so yeah.
Yeah, me too. Absolutely. As we finish up, Lance, I would like for you to give our viewers, our listeners, one piece of practical guidance, something that they can sort of take away from this and say, okay, I can implement what Lance was talking about, something they can do right away. What would it be?
I would say that, have I got a minute?
You do.
Okay. So I would say this. There are three things we do in the world, everywhere. Doesn't matter what place we're talking about, whether it's work or home or what. Mastery, doing whatever we do well. Chemistry, relating well with people. Delivery, identifying the needs of others and meeting them. Those are the three things we do. You can't wake up in the morning and do them better, but each one of those has an accelerator. So mastery, what's the accelerator? Learning. The more we learn, the greater the mastery. Chemistry, the accelerator is empathy. The more we empathize, the greater the chemistry. Delivery, the accelerator is listening. The more we listen, the more able we are to meet the needs of others. Now, you do the math on this, and let's say you're a 10 on mastery and a 6 on learning. This tells us you're wonderful at mastery, but you're not going to be, because there's not enough learning going on here to sustain that level of mastery. So you subtract 10 from 6, and you end up with -4. That's called a vector of -4. This is a forward indicator telling you that your mastery is terrific, but not going to continue that way. So that little model can change everything. It's the most powerful coaching model. It's a model for sorting out arguments with a spouse. It's a way of organizing politics. It's a universal system that can be used everywhere.
That is fabulous. I love that. Thank you so much. Lance, this has been a pleasure and always an honor to talk to you. Please share with our viewers and our listeners where they can find out more about you, all your wonderful resources, your 21 books, and of course, the Bellwether Effect.
Well, best place to go is secretan.com, secretan.com. And everything is there, a little cornucopia of the internet, how wonderful it is today.
Thank you, sir. It was a pleasure and honor. I hope you'll stay with us to the end. I always love our conversations, and I'm always enlightened by your presence. Thank you, sir.
It's been a joy to be with you. Thanks, Dov.
Thank you, sir.
By the way,
And
I love you.
by the way, I love you too. Thank you.
Not hard, is it?
Not at all. And for you, listener, dear listener, if you want to hang out with other conscious leaders and chat about this episode or any of past episodes, you can simply go to Facebook and look for our page, Dov Baron Leadership and Loyalty Podcast, to find out how you can hire Lance or work with Lance. Like you said, Secretan.com. We, of course, will post all the links to all the different places to get in touch with Lance and all of his work. To find out more about how you can hire me, Dov Baron, as a speaker or a strategist for your organization, simply go to fullmontyleadership.com/consulting or fullmontyleadership.com/speaking. And please be aware that the research consistently shows that the fastest growing companies face exactly the same challenges as probably you do. They're spending money, time, energy, attracting, training, and developing talent, only to have them leave at an alarming rate. If you're frustrated with investing in training and developing your talent, only to have them leave before you get your ROI, then come talk to us at fullmontyleadership.com, where we provide the essential leadership skills to rekindle and amplify the hidden loyalty assets inside of your organization by tapping into purpose. Fullmontyleadership.com, because you can't outsource authenticity. And you can also stop by the Matrix, matrix.fullmontyleadership.com. You don't need a triple W, just matrix, like the movie, .fullmontyleadership.com, and get your authentic leadership Matrix self-assessment tool. It's valued at $197. It's absolutely free to you for being a viewer or listener. I want to thank you for sharing the show with everybody you know. Till next time, stay curious, my friend. Stay curious about how you can break open that wall where you have a personal and a professional side and really show up truly, deeply authentic, and maybe with a little more love. I'm Dov Baron. I'm here to assist you tapping into your deep greatness to reach that next level of clarity, focus, and purpose and profit in your business, your life, and your leadership impact. I am out.